All right, so the first thing I guess I'm gonna get into is form. I think that was the top voted one, or at least close to it. And I'll first go over some of the mistakes that I made. So first two I wanna say is like, don't take anything I say as like true. Just take it as a hypothesis that you can test out for yourself, because I'm still learning. So like, this is just my experience and what's worked for me. So the first mistake I really made was when I was running, I would focus on my foot hitting the ground and then pushing back like that. So I'd be running, foot hit the ground and push, because I learned from a physical therapist who ran, and I figured he probably knew what he was talking about, that that's what I should be doing. That should be powering through my glutes and pushing the earth back in order to power my stride. And my knees would always be really achy after I ran, especially longer distances. And I never really thought anything of it. I thought I just might, have some bad knees. That's just the way it is. And then I found someone who is a different running coach, and she had really good advice, so I followed hers, and she contradicted what this physical therapist had said, and said that if you focus on your foot hitting the ground and pushing off, you're actually gonna cause a lot of stress to your foot, ankle, knee, hip, like that entire chain that goes all the way up, and you're actually gonna cause problems. And I've had a stress fracture during a race. I think if I would have learned this before that race, I would not have had a stress fracture. So what you wanna do, instead of focusing on your foot hitting the ground and pushing, it's actually the opposite. Running is more of a pulling motion. So your foot hits the ground, and you want to think about immediately, as you're transferring the other foot forward, you're pulling this up. And I'll turn like this so you can see it. And you're not pulling, you don't want to think about pulling your knee up, because when you think about just pulling your knee up, what do? Your foot gets way out in front of you, and you're going to strike, and it's going to go up. Same effect as pushing the earth away. So you don't want to think about the knee going up. You don't want to think about pushing back. What you want to do is think about pulling the foot up directly underneath your hip. So as your foot hits, I'll get kind of a running stance. As your foot hits, then you're pulling it up like this. So notice how my foot, if I just hold my hand in line with my hip, my foot is generally right underneath my hip. So we're already, getting really good movement, and you're actually able to power through your glutes with this, but you don't have to think about it. It's involuntary. So what this does is, if you're focused on pulling your foot up underneath your hip as fast as you can, like you don't have to run fast, but you want to keep this, as soon as your foot hits the ground, then you want to be pulling it up. So it can be like this. You might be running, slower, so your legs would not be pulled up as quickly, but you're still doing that exact same motion. If you're running quick, it's going to look more like this, but the concept is still the exact same. So what doesn't matter as well is the foot height. So if I'm running like a 10-minute mile pace, my foot's only gonna get pulled up like this. Notice how my foot isn't coming up that high, but it's getting pulled up right underneath my hip, like this. If I'm running faster, an 8-minute mile, it's gonna come up higher, because I generate more force doing it this way. So so don't worry about pulling your foot up really high. It's just keeping that foot pulled up in line with the hip, regardless of what pace you're at, and just doing that quickly. So that's what you want to focus on. If you focus on picking up your foot as soon as it hits the ground, just really keep track of your feet. As soon as it hits the ground, you're pulling it up, going to the next one, pulling it up, going to the next one. And what this does is, if you think about running, if you're pushing off, that is a lot of effort to be exerting. But if you're lifting underneath your hip and you have a little forward lean to it, all you're doing is just releasing your foot, and you naturally go forward. So, in the other form, I have to push myself to go forward. If I'm lifting my foot and having a little bit of forward lean, I'm just releasing the foot, and I'm already there. And I do the same thing with the other foot. So I foot up, lean, pull, lean, pull. I don't have a lot of room. I'm doing this in my living room, but I hope that kind of gets the general idea of practice standing, pulling one foot up, and let yourself lean forward. And if you let yourself lean forward, your foot is naturally going to go out when it needs to. It's just like, that's Shelly, by the way. That's my other running helper. She likes to run on occasion. So if you pull your foot up and lean forward, pull, and you just start going like that. And then if you keep focusing on your foot getting pulled up, getting pulled up, getting pulled up, what this does is it actually makes that your foot strike is naturally going to be lighter. You're not going to be hitting the ground as hard, because you're thinking about pulling your foot up immediately. This has saved my knees so far. It is very, very important. And I don't want to make like a super long video, so I'll probably leave it with this. and I can make more videos in the future. But for running form, I would just focus on one thing at a time. Don't try to change your entire gait all at once. Focus on one thing and perfecting one thing, and then move on to the next part. Just a good drill that I do is I just practice like this. And I just kind of look at my feet for a second, make sure I'm pulling, okay. And then I look straight ahead. And I just keep doing this back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I'm just drilling that movement of pulling my foot up underneath my hip and not getting out behind me, not getting out in front, right? Foot comes right underneath the hip. The rest of the body will fall in place. You can practice that. You can practice pulling a foot up, leaning forward, and doing a few drills like that. But that's like a good starting point just to try out and see if it works for you. Like I said, you know, the physical therapist that I followed, that I got the previous advice from, that didn't work very well, you know, like I would have thought that that would have worked because he knew what he was talking about. But just because someone has, out of breath, sorry. Just because someone has credentials, you know, doesn't mean that they're inherently right. And the same thing, you know, just because I have experience doesn't mean I'm right. It just is a viewpoint to try out for yourself. See if it works for you, see how it feels. And I hope this helped.